They knew what they were doing. They crossed the line, not by accident, but by choice. And now they want mercy? No. Some people don't deserve your forgiveness. They deserve the silence that follows your strength. They deserve the consequences of their own actions. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You showed patience, you gave them chances, and they turned your kindness into a weakness to exploit. But that ends now. Because when someone repeatedly chooses to disrespect you, they don't deserve your empathy. They deserve distance, detachment, consequences. This is your reminder. Not everyone should be spared. Some must be taught by loss, not through words, but by the absence of your presence. These are 5 reasons why they deserve everything that's coming, and why you must show no mercy. Reason 1. They knew exactly what they were doing. Pain does not always present itself in a surprising manner. It does not always show up without being invited. Sometimes, it will knock on your door while wearing a smile that is recognizable to you. It has a soothing tone to its voice. It remembers the things that you enjoy the most. While it acts as if it is concerned, it is secretly calculating how much it can take from you before you realize what it is doing. However, there are some people in this world who do not accidentally cause harm to other people. They never inadvertently cross over into other territory. It is in their plans. They practice acts of kindness as if it were a strategy. They have a sufficient degree of similarity to your beliefs in order to win your trust, and once they have established themselves in your life to a significant degree, the actual damage starts to occur. These are not spirits that are confused. They are the masterminds behind the chaos. Individuals who are aware of the sensation of betrayal, but nonetheless choose to act in a manner that is betraying. They are aware of the boundaries between right from wrong. They are aware of the results that results from their actions. Also, they continue to do it. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Epictetus, a man who experienced slavery and rose to become one of the wisest voices in Stoic philosophy, once observed. Epictetus was a guy who rose to prominence in Stoic philosophy. Indeed, our perception is the primary factor that determines the intensity of our discomfort. On the other hand, Epictetus did not advise ignoring reality. Not only did he not instruct us to romanticize toxicity, but he also did not educate us to portray abuse with kindness. No, Jesus instructed us to take things in their purest form. And when someone reveals themselves to you by causing you to suffer repeated and intentional pain, it is not your judgment that is flawed. Rather, it is your tolerance that has been weaponized throughout this episode. You allowed them some time. You extended grace to them. You enabled them to provide an explanation. And each time they increased their level of aggression by using your empathy as an excuse. It was a test for you. Slowly, softly, and with deliberate aim. This is due to the fact that individuals like this do not arrive with a wrecking ball. A needle is being brought in by them. A trickle of disdain gradually dripping down. Your sense of self-worth is gradually diminishing. They had a complete understanding of what they were doing when they disregarded your boundaries. When it came to telling you half-truths, they were completely aware of what they were talking about. They were well aware of what they were doing when they altered the story in order to cause you to question the reality that you were experiencing. By no means was this clumsiness. The calculation was done. In addition, when someone makes the deliberate choice to cause you pain on multiple occasions, they are making a choice to gamble with your trust, your time, and your mental tranquility. That is not an error at all. That is a business tactic, a structure that is based on your silence. And when that system ultimately fails, you have no obligation to do anything for them. There will be no mercy. There is no explanation. Not a single ounce of energy should be spent attempting to repair what they have broken. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, was a man who struggled with his own thoughts while bearing the weight of an empire. He once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If that is not true, then make sure not to say it." Now, your question is, did they actually live by that? Or did they engage in behavior that was unethical and make statements that were not true when it was convenient for them to do so? There is no such thing as being a victim of circumstance when one acts with awareness. They are the ones who wrote it. In addition, the moment you become aware of this reality, you immediately stop creating excuses for them. You decide to quit mentally replaying conversations in the hopes of locating the version of the conversation in which you misread it. It is not true. It was merely a wish that you had. On the other hand, the Stoics instructed us to confront the unsettling for the purpose of facing reality head-on without flinching. He who spares the guilty punishes the innocent, Seneca warns us, and we should remember this. Give that some thought. In every instance in which you let them off the hook, you were the one who punished yourself. You were forced to bear the consequences of their actions, while they were able to walk away unaffected, unaltered, and unappreciative. That is all over now. The reality is that you do not have to yell at all. I don't think you need to elaborate. It is not necessary for you to advocate for justice or to persuade other people of what they have done. Their own actions had already shown that they were guilty. Indeed, vengeance is not the most effective form of response. It's quite clear. It is silent. A boundary constructed out of stone. A face that does not show any signs of flinching when they begin to crawl back. The fact that you let people deal with the repercussions of their actions does not constitute cruel treatment. In deciding to withdraw, you are not a heartless person. You are not resentful because you have stopped bending. In the end, you have woken up. Recognize that you are not the only person who is similar to you. There are certain people who do not possess your heart, your honesty, or your code of action. And you are not to blame for that. Some people will put you through a test to determine whether or not you love yourself enough to leave them behind. Allow them to learn the lesson the hard way. Due to the fact that there comes a time when mercy is no longer considered noble, rather it is destructive. A moment at when forgiveness turns into a vicious circle of abuse and patience becomes into a method of self-inflicted harm that is gradual. At that time, you will know that they were aware of it. They were always aware of it. They were unaware of what they were consuming. It was clear to them what they were destroying. Despite the fact that they were aware of how far they could go, they went even further since they believed that you would never stop them. However, you will, and when you do, you should not explain it. Don't try to rationalize it. Do not provide them with the ending that they have never deserved. Allow the result to be the result of your quiet. Please allow your absence to serve as the penalty. They should eventually be forced to confront the reflection that they have been trying to avoid, and you should not hide them from it. It is not you who is their lesson. To wake up, you are the alarm clock. Simply because when someone makes the conscious decision to cause you harm, they are also making the decision to take the risk of losing you. And you are not responsible for bearing that load. That is the cost that they must bear. So please wait in line. Regain your sense of calm. Don't forget who you were before they took away your ability to see clearly. You are not here to be used, to be misunderstood, or to play a role in the game that someone else is responsible for. You have come to this place to take a firm stance when it comes to your truth. They were completely aware of what they were conducting. Now, make sure they are aware of the precise expense of that. Reason 2. They were given every chance to change. At some point, your patience will take a turn for the worse and become painful. In the event that your comprehension turns into a prison, for the reason that there are occasions when people are not without chances, rather, they are missing character. They were given warnings by you. They received explanations from you. They were given more than enough time to examine their behavior, to make changes to it, and to develop as individuals. However, they did not. It's not that they couldn't, but rather that they didn't care enough to make an effort. People were able to hear you express the truth. They remained silent as they watched you suffer. When you were trying to maintain peace, they witnessed you shattering your own heart. Nevertheless, they did not change in any way. It is not a lack of awareness, rather it is a rejection to move forward. Furthermore, when someone is constantly shown the harm that they create and still refuses to change, they no longer deserve your sympathy. The stillness that follows the final straw is something that they deserve. The first step towards amendment is the recognition of error, remarked Seneca, a Roman Stoic who extensively wrote about wisdom and restraint. Seneca was known for his prolific writings on the subject. However, how do you make amends for something that you refuse to acknowledge? These individuals do not change because doing so would require them to acknowledge that they were in the wrong. Furthermore, acknowledging fault demands humility, which is something that their ego cannot tolerate. Instead, they alter the narrative in some way. They make themselves the victim. They change the course of events. Suddenly, the intensity of your suffering is too great. You have great expectations for yourself. The boundaries you set are unrealistic. How come? Mostly due to the fact that any reality that conflicts with their comfort becomes an attack. Do not, however, give in to it. You handed up the mirror to them. They were given the map by you. You went so far as to stand next to them, ready to assist them at every step of the way. The fact remains that they turned their backs. It is important to realize that transformation is not a speech. This is not a guarantee. In the middle of the night, there is not a deluge of people willing to apologize. Modification is behavior. Consistency is the key. It's accountability without anybody asking you to do it. Therefore, if someone continues to injure you and then asks for forgiveness, they are not evolving, rather they are looping. Additionally, they are trusting that your compassion will keep that cycle going. In any case, this is not about being chilly. It's all about being transparent. The Stoics did not have a naivete regarding the nature of humans. On numerous occasions, Marcus Aurelius told himself, "You will encounter individuals who are intrusive, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, envious, and incapable of social interaction." He didn't say to stay away from them at all costs. He stated, "They are like this because they are unable to differentiate between good and evil." Now, what if they are aware of it? What if they are aware of it but still choose to cause harm? After that, what happens? In such case, it is no longer about comprehension. Rather, it's about the consequences. It is not harsh of you to ultimately proclaim that enough is enough. You are not a heartless person if you walk away after giving every warning, every openness, and every last ounce of your emotional generosity. Indeed, continuing to endure the intolerable is not an act of charity. Rather, it is an act of betrayal. A betrayal of your own principles and beliefs. One who has betrayed their own peace. A person is deserving of watching the door close on them when they spit on the opportunity to perform better for themselves. Slowly, in fact, devoid of any drama, absent any anger, only the truth. the repercussions are fair. This is due to the fact that the more you justify someone's failure to develop, the more they will believe that they do not have to. And why would they do that? Yes, they had you. They were granted consent from you. They got to hear your quiet. They had their time with you. All of it was thrown away by them. It is not your responsibility to wait until they are ready to act. On your own schedule, growth does not occur, and consequences do not wait until they are comfortable for you to experience them. This is the place where you, not through vengeance but by distance, restore your identity. The power of being done, rather than threats, is what is being used here. It is possible to experience an ultimate form of silence, the kind that occurs after all of the opportunities for a second chance have been reduced to ashes. And while you are lying there in stillness, a wonderful thing takes place. You rise. This is not a person who is bitter, but rather one who is boundaried. Rather than out of resentment, it is out of wisdom. Thus, allow them to experience the gravity of what they have lost. Allow them to contemplate the reverberations of your absence. They should be allowed to relive the opportunities they passed up, while you are able to rebuild your life without the stress of waiting. To put it simply, the truth is that those who do not change when they are given the opportunity to do so will not change when they are confronted with the consequences. However, by that time it will be irrelevant, because you won't be present to witness it in person. Every opportunity to make a change was provided to them. Now, permit them to live with the alternative that they have chosen. Reason 3. They thought you'd never walk away. The most significant error that they made was not the way that they treated you. The lies, the betrayal, the contempt, and the disrespect were not the factors that led to this. The manner in which they took your time for granted, or the manner in which they anticipated your forgiveness as if it were some kind of currency that they could continue to spend indefinitely, was not the issue. Not at all. The actual error was in believing that you would never depart. They gained their self-assurance as a result of that. Because of this, they became arrogant. They felt that you would always be there, ready to clean up the mess that they had made, with your arms open and your heart gentle. You were always that way until you stopped being that way. There is a particular kind of arrogance that can only be found in individuals who are under the impression that they own your patience. They put your limitations to the test as if it were a game. After provoking, they pretend to be innocent. They test your limits in order to determine whether or not you will bring them back to a place where they feel comfortable. And as time goes on, they stop being afraid of the repercussions because you never hold them accountable. The words you speak are powerful, but the deeds you take are weak. However, you do not walk away from them. However, they do take note. The attitude is not one of respect, but of entitlement. Every time you remain after the damage has been done, they use it as evidence that they are capable of doing it again. And once more. And once more. A punishment that is delayed is not a punishment, it is permission, Seneca cautioned us. A punishment that is delayed is not a punishment. And that is exactly what you offered them, without intending to do so. You did not intend to do that. You were not a feeble person. You should have known better. I was hoping that they would understand, in the hopes that they would care enough to change. I was hoping that the weight of what they were doing would be brought to their attention by your love. However, it did not. That is not a reflection of your value. Rather, it is a reflection of the value that they hold. The manner in which a person behaves when they are in danger of losing you is not a satisfactory indicator of their true character. The manner in which they conduct themselves when they are entirely secure and when they believe that you will never leave. When they do that, their disguise falls off. In addition, it is precisely what took place. It became second nature to them that you would always be willing to forgive. You would always provide an explanation, so you would never lose your peace of mind. Consequently, they ceased being cautious. When it came to how their actions affected you, they stopped caring. They were successful in persuading themselves that you were the kind of person who would lodge complaints but would never shut the door. When someone has this belief, they will cease trying to conceal the worst aspects of themselves within themselves. They stop acting as if they. It is because they do not fear losing you that they reveal themselves to you in their true form. On the other hand, the Stoics did not instruct us to put up with people without end. They did not instruct us to justify our lack of moral character in any way. We learned from them to be faithful to the truth, even when it causes us pain. Never depend on the admiration of others, Epictetus advised, to put it in the best possible way. There is no power contained within it. Personal merit is not something that can be established by an external source. To put it another way, you should never wait for someone else to recognize your value before you demonstrate it to yourself. If a person believes that your love is boundless, that your forgiveness is automatic, and that your presence is guaranteed, then they do not trust you. They make use of you, and they rely on your quiet to continue doing what they are doing. Nevertheless, serenity is not synonymous with stillness. However, leaving is not the same thing as giving up on something. In certain situations, the most audacious and influential action you can do is to just walk away. Mostly due to the fact that it upsets those individuals who believe that you would always remain. This throws their preconceived notions into disarray and destroys them. In doing so, it compels them to confront the reality that they had never anticipated would come to pass. That your love has boundaries and that your soul has expectations. You have never owed them in perpetuity, particularly not after they made fun of the fact that you were kind. Particularly not when they made your loyalty into a chain that they could pull. You stayed for a significantly longer period of time than you ought to have, and you are aware of this fact. But it's possible that you had no choice. It's possible that you had to remain for a sufficient amount of time to understand that no amount of waiting would be able to change things. That they were not going to believe any of the explanations that were given to them. Despite the fact that we made a lot of efforts, they were not going to care. When they convinced themselves that you would never go, it was the point when they stopped treating you as if you could leave. This is the moment when respect is lost. The rot starts to set in at that point. When someone decides that they no longer believe you have the ability to walk, they begin to treat you as if you are beneath them. It is as if you are merely an accessory to their comfort, rather than a person who has their own requirements. At that point, they will no longer be afraid of your silence because they believe that they have taught you to communicate with apologies rather than boundaries. However, after that, there is complete silence. We're not talking about the kind that's tense, one that is brimming with conclusiveness. This is the kind of person who asserts, "You will never have this version of me again." This silence is not one of vengeance. No, it is not anger. The quiet power of someone who took too many chances and then at long last made the decision to stop taking risks is what this is. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and philosopher, would tell himself on a daily basis, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, considering that I am looking for the truth." Even though it was painful, he accepted the truth. Is it possible that they did? Alternatively, did they avoid it, bury it, make fun of it, or pretend that your suffering was exaggerated? Those kinds of people do not ever look for the truth. They stay hidden from it. Instead of confronting themselves, they would keep you at a low profile. Furthermore, the mirror that they have been avoiding ultimately catches up with them when you walk away from them. They have nothing but their own echo to distract them because you are not there to provide that distraction. You did not leave because you had lost interest in the situation. You chose to go because you had finally come to the conclusion that they never really did. And acknowledging that fact is the first step toward achieving freedom. Not only from them, but also from the part of you that believed that love meant carrying on, regardless of the circumstances. That is not the case. It is not love to be able to tolerate abuse. Betrayal is not something that love can tolerate. Respect for oneself is the foundation of love, genuine love. Therefore, allow them to remain amid the ruins of what they used to take for granted. Allow them to ponder whether or not they went too far. Give them the opportunity to reach for a version of you that does not exist anymore. Don't answer the door when they come knocking on your door. Those people believe that you would never leave. Give them the opportunity to see how incorrect they were. Reason 4. They took advantage of your kindness. There is no weakness in being kind. It does not exist. If, on the other hand, you are generous with your heart, there are certain people who would view it as a door that needs to be walked through rather than a soul that deserves consideration. They misunderstand your attitude of patience as passivity. They see your compassion to be an indication of acquiescence. And in a methodical and slow manner, they start to test the limits of what they can take without giving anything in return. At first, it may seem insignificant. A favor that is not returned, a careless phrase, or an apology that is not accepted. But with every offense that goes unpunished, they get more brazen. It is your generosity that serves as their cover. Due to your quiet, they have developed a strategy. In addition, before you realize it, you are not being appreciated. Rather, you are being utilized. A warning was issued by Epictetus, who stated, "Know you not that a good man does nothing for the sake of appearance, but for the sake of having done justice?" Due to the fact that it was in your nature, you donated. It was because it felt right that you assisted. You showed forgiveness because you had faith in the possibility of a brighter future. However, not everyone is deserving of grace of such magnitude. Some people take it, but they don't perceive any value in the origin of it. They come to anticipate it, to demand it, and to construct their sense of security on the assumption that you will never let them down. And ultimately, they will completely stop seeing you. You transform into a function rather than a person. They have a safety net for their shortcomings. The answer to their recklessness is provided here. In some cases, it may not be immediately apparent when someone takes advantage of your generosity. It is not overt. This is the friend who only calls when they have something that they require. The person who flourishes under your efforts but refuses to reciprocate is the spouse who is the problem. Someone at work is the one who relies on your abilities without giving you credit for them. Moreover, you continue to offer in the hope that others will take notice. You go beyond what is reasonable. You reason things out. In your head, you tell yourself that perhaps they are going through something, that perhaps they will come to their senses, and that perhaps they will change. On the other hand, the truth is that those who profit from imbalance have no motive to bring it back into balance. Why would they do that? It is a suitable arrangement for them. You are the one who bears the responsibility. These advantages belong to them. When it comes to everything that you are afraid of, you behave like mortals. But when it comes to everything that you want, you behave like immortals. He was referring to time and how we are afraid of death, but behave as if we have an infinite amount of time to spend. However, the same may be said here. Because you are afraid of confrontation, you put it off. You don't want to be rejected, so you put up with being mistreated. Due to your fear of being misunderstood, you choose to remain silent. Furthermore, throughout this entire process, they continue to amass the rewards of your generosity, treating your perseverance as if it were a right. Not love would be that. There's no friendship in that. This is an example of exploitation because you did not show kindness. It is not possible to use it as a weapon against you. By opening your heart, you did not do so with the intention of becoming a stepping stone for the comfort of another person. And when you eventually take a step back, when you begin to say no, and when you begin to create boundaries, you will discover something that is peculiar. Those individuals who had before lauded you for your generosity have suddenly accused you of being self-centered. Those individuals who rely on your emotional work begin to call you derogatory names. How come? Due to the fact that you altered the terms. Due to the fact that you ceased allowing them to benefit from your efforts while providing them with nothing in return. You cease to be simple to use, and this is frequently the first time that you become aware of the true nature of other people. In their philosophy, the Stoics never believed in becoming cynical or resentful. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. We are reminded of this. And this is the most important thing. It is not necessary for you to become cruel. There is no need for you to speak overly loudly. You are not required to recompense for the courtesy. All that is required of you is to quit providing in situations where you are not respected. You must guard your generosity, not as a weapon but as something holy, and you must do so with protection. It is not your responsibility to bear the burden of those individuals who refuse to stand up for themselves. This is not the place for you to tend to the life of another person while your own garden withers away. The act of shutting the door behind you can be the most self-loving thing you can do for yourself at times. It is not a slam. Simply shut it down, carefully, in a low voice. And lastly, you are not obligated to have unending patience for those individuals who persistently choose their own well-being over yours. In every situation, you do not have to be the more mature person. It is not your responsibility to be the one who possesses the most maturity in the room. In the event that your compassion has turned into a crutch for another individual, or if your love has turned into a leash, it is time to let go. Give them the opportunity to experience what it is like to fall short of your generosity. They should be allowed to sit with the absence that they never anticipated would come. The reason for this is that when someone takes advantage of your generosity, they are not just showing you contempt, they are also revealing who they truly are. And here is the bit that you simply cannot ignore. This is the kind of betrayal that does not heal with the passage of time because it was not committed by an unknown person. Someone who smiled in your presence, who nodded in agreement, and who accepted your assistance without any hesitation was the source of this information. Nevertheless, if the roles were reversed, they would never extend the same assistance to you. And it is the reason why it hurts so much. Because of this, it becomes more personal. Since you do not require retribution, it is not necessary for you to reveal them. In fact, you don't even need to provide an explanation. Quit turning up for people who would never cross a room for you. That is all that is required of you. Quit showing up. When you are the one who is in need, you should stop pouring money into hands that are never open. Put an end to letting those who never even bother to let you know how much they appreciate your generosity. It is not bitterness, rather it is equilibrium. This is not a sign of weakness on your part. On the other hand, it must be protected, because even your most admirable qualities can be exploited to bring you to your knees if you are not careful. Reason 5. They mistook your silence for surrender. I didn't hear you yell. You chose not to take revenge. You didn't cause a scandal at all. And as a result of that, they believed that they had triumphed. It was perceived by them as a sign of weakness. He misunderstood your composure for a sign of defeat. However, they failed to remember one key fact. Acquiescence does not necessarily mean silence. It is sometimes a plan to remain silent. Sometimes, it is the sign of someone who has already made up their mind. A decision to let their actions speak louder than their words. To walk away rather than wasting another breath. To maintain their power rather than perform for those who are not deserving of it. People feel uneasy when they encounter a kind of strength that is not overt. When you choose not to debate, when you refrain from taking the bait, and when you do not provide an explanation, it causes them to feel uneasy, due to the fact that they have become accustomed to a version of you that will answer. It makes sense now. That is an attempt. They are in a state of panic when that version was removed. They are attempting to gain control. They speak more loudly, exert more pressure, and probe deeper. Nevertheless, ye do not move. There is no response from you. Additionally, during that period of silence, they start to comprehend that you are not giving up. You are finished. The teachings of Epictetus include the following. If someone is successful in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That is a lesson that you have learned. When someone demanded your fury, you stopped giving up your peace of mind because you were embarrassed. You opted for order rather than lawlessness. You opted for clarity rather than drama. Not a sign of weakness, but rather of mastery. Since anyone is capable of screaming, anyone is able to let loose. On the other hand, to remain silent while someone pushes you to your limits, that requires a level of control that the majority of people never achieve. They were under the impression that it indicated they had broken you. The fact that you had outgrown them was not something they understood. The time has come for you to stop trying to persuade them of your value. We have exhausted all of our efforts to save what they kept lighting ablaze. You have finished making an effort to demonstrate your point of view to individuals who were determined to misunderstand you. A limit that you set was silence. Boundaries, despite their invisibility, possess significant power. After you had finally stopped replying, you removed the weapon from their grasp and took it away from them. Not because you were unsuccessful in winning the debate, but rather because you were no longer required to do so. A quote attributed to Marcus Aurelius states that the best answer to anger is silence. Nevertheless, that quiet must be deliberate on your part. Instead of coming from a position of fear, it must originate from a place of strength. Being able to transcend one's feelings is more important than being able to repress them. The key is to acknowledge that certain conflicts are actually traps disguised as battles. When you interact with people that thrive on chaos, you will only find yourself drawn into their world. That sometimes the most defiant act is simply leaving without saying anything is the most defiant deed. However, your silence also had a role in something else. They were thus exposed. Not having your voice to divert attention away from their activities, they were able to carry them out without any protection. Their harshness reverberated more loudly because they did not have your reactions to support theirs. Due to your absence, a mirror was held up, and what they saw in that mirror was the same thing that you had seen all along, but because they were too conceited, too entitled, and too focused on themselves to admit it. When they were no longer able to rely on your grace to clean up their mess, they were able to see themselves for who they truly were. A manipulative person should avoid silence at all costs. They thrive on the response you give them. They take pleasure in your bafflement. They center their lies on the fact that you are looking for a resolution. On the other hand, they lose their hold on you when you become completely quiet. It is no longer possible to alter anything. Not a single twist left to go. You become untouchable, and they leave themselves open to scrutiny. According to a quote attributed to Seneca, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. This is also true with regard to your energy. When you give it to everyone who insults you, challenges you, or disrespects you, you are dispersing your power. On the other hand, you become unshakable when you retreat from others, when you become choosy, and when you keep your presence reserved for those who actually see it. Your lack of speech turns into a stronghold rather than a refuge, a proclamation, not a disappearance by any means. They interpreted your lack of conversation as a sign that you were too terrified to fight. They never took into account the possibility that you might have just concluded that it was not worth it. The fact that you had calculated the cost of involvement and determined that it was insulting to your dignity, that you had arrived at a stage where clarity had taken the place of feel-good feelings. In addition, once that threshold is achieved, there is no option to turn back. Keeping quiet was not an act of surrender. Finally, it was over, at your discretion, devoid of any drama. As opposed to pleading, if there is no performance, it was a peaceful conclusion to a chapter that you ought to have closed a long time ago. And perhaps they will never be able to comprehend it. Perhaps they will continue to embellish their story in order to save their ego. However, that is no longer a concern of yours. Understanding is not anything you owe to them. They are not owed any noise by you. You owe it to yourself to be at peace, and that is precisely what that silence brought you. There is a certain type of person who is of the opinion that they are always entitled to the final word, who approaches every circumstance as if it were a struggle, who has a need to triumph even if it means bringing you to your knees. Furthermore, when you leave without a concluding argument or a parting shot, they are unable to deal with it. Since they never bothered to be concerned with the truth, for them, control was a priority. At this point, they have none. Therefore, if someone ever tells you that remaining silent is a sign of weakness, you should give them the opportunity to speak. It is okay to underestimate them. Whatever it is that helps them get to sleep at night, let them believe it. Because you and I are both aware of the fact that true power does not require itself to be announced. It simply leaves without turning around and never returns. Stoics were living proof of this reality. The reason they exercised self-control was not because they were terrified. Rather, they were aware of how uncommon and valuable the state of inner calm actually was. They taught that the mind is the master of the mind, that we have the ability to choose how we react, and that the actual source of power is the self-discipline that we cultivate. The instant you decided to remain silent, not out of fear, but out of strength, you put that concept into physical practice. The reason for this is not confusion, but rather clarity. Let them wonder what caused you to utter no sound. Allow them to pursue closure that they will never come to obtain. Place them in the spot where your energy used to be, and let them sit there. That space alone is more persuasive than any argument that could ever be made. Place them in the spot where your energy used to be, and let them sit there. That space alone is more persuasive than any argument that could ever be made. And what about that hush? That is not the case. In the time that they were in your presence, they failed to recognize everything that is contained inside it. We no longer have it. In addition, they will be forced to accept that. Staying true to one's principles is a powerful act when one declares enough, in the sense that you will no longer save the very ones who take pleasure in your pain. However, not everyone is deserving of remaining in your life. There are certain people who do not merit your understanding. Some people are deserving of the harsh justice that comes from natural forces. Allow them to be consumed by the fire that they started. This is not because you despise them. On the other hand, because you no longer despise yourself to the extent that you continue to ignore it. Their decisions were made by them. Allow them to cohabit with them. Show no mercy, and proceed with peace and stoic strength as you move forward.